That completes the urgent question. We now move to the next urgent question. I'll let the front benches change over. Sir Stephen Timms.
Mr. Speaker, will the Minister make a statement about the closure that's been announced today of the Interfaith Network?
Minister.
Can I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for raising the issue of the Interfaith Network. I am grateful for all of his work as Chair of the APPG on Faith and Society and as a long-standing advocate for dialogue across faiths. As my honourable friend, the Minister for Local Government, said during an adjournment debate in January, we know full well the role that faith communities play in our society. We are extremely supportive of efforts by faith groups and others to bring together people of different faiths and beliefs. The Secretary of State wrote to the co-chairs of the Interfaith Network on the 19th of January this year to inform them that he was minded to withdraw the offer of funding for the 2023-24 financial year. This was because of the appointment of a member of the Muslim Council of Britain to the Board of Trustees of the IFN. As this House will be aware, successive governments have had a long-standing policy of non-engagement with the MCB. The appointment of an MCB member to the core governance structure of a government-funded organisation, therefore, poses a reputational risk to government. The Secretary of State invited the IFN to make representations on this matter, which they subsequently did. The Secretary of State carefully considered the points raised by the IFN before concluding that their points were outweighed by the need to maintain the government's policy of non-engagement with the MCB and the risk of compromising the credibility and effectiveness of that policy. Interfaith work is valuable, but that does not require us to use taxpayers' money in a way that legitimises the influence of organisations such as the MCB. The Department regularly reminds our partners, including the IFN, of the importance of developing sustainable funding arrangements rather than relying on taxpayers' money, which can never be guaranteed. The potential closure of the organisation is therefore a matter for the IFN as an independent charity and not the government. The government is and continues to be fully supportive of developing and maintaining strong relationships across faiths and beliefs.
Sir Stington.
Mr. Speaker, since 1987, the Interfaith Network has been the UK's principal vehicle for interfaith dialogue, supporting the annual Interfaith Week and supporting activities and dialogue undertaken by interfaith groups right across the whole country. And the network has been supported by government funding for some 20 years. The IFN was told on the 31st of March last year, before the trustee appointment that the Minister has referred to, that its funding would be ended from the following day. Why has the organisation been treated in this extraordinary way? Last July, the network received a letter from the Secretary of State to inform it that it would, after all, receive funding for the current financial year. That promise has never been honoured. Why not? And is it not, given the debate in this chamber yesterday, extraordinarily stupid to be shutting down at this precise point our principal vehicle in the UK for Muslim-Jewish dialogue? Surely we need more, not to be shutting that down. Why has the Secretary of State not honoured the commitment he made to me, to meet me, the Right Honourable Member for Chipping Barnet and the Noble Lord Singh, to discuss this matter before making his decision? And will the Minister pay tribute and express thanks to the trustees and officers of the Interfaith Network for the very important contribution they've made to UK national life over the last 37 years.
I truly believe that interfaith work makes a good contribution to our society. I've got one of the most diverse constituencies in the entire country, and I have on a number of occasions brought together my mosque, my synagogue, Christian churches and my gurdwara. So we recognise the benefits of interfaith activity, and I would like to thank the Interfaith Network for their work. However, we have always been clear with this particular organisation, and indeed any other organisation and charity which DLUC funds, that they need to put in place alternative sources of funding. And as I said in my initial remarks, government cannot fund this organisation where there is a trustee who is part of the MCB.
Theresa Villiers.
I was contacted last year by my constituent Esmond Rosen of the Barnet Multi-Faith Forum expressing concern about the imminent withdrawal of funding from the IFN. And as we've heard, it looked in July as if the problem was resolved, at least for the financial year. So I do feel it's regrettable that we're at the position we are. I completely understand the importance of not engaging with organisations which have hardline views, but surely we can find some compromise to keep the IFN in business, because they do some incredibly valuable work in fostering respect and mutual understanding between different faith groups.
I'd like to thank my right honourable friend for all of the work that she does do in interfaith. I just want to make clear that what changed since July was the appointment of a trustee in November who is part of the MCB. In terms of interfaith work, there are so many examples of positive, thriving initiatives across the country that are bringing people together. DLUC funds a number of these partners, including Near Neighbours and Strengthening Faith Institutions, who organise local-level interfaith events to foster community cohesion.
Shadow Minister Liz Twist.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I begin by thanking the Right Honourable Member for East Ham for securing this urgent question. Interfaith and multi-faith dialogue are absolutely essential components for society to come together to not only resolve differences but to build strong collaborative communities able to come together at times of need. Given recent events, the war and the violence in Gaza, this is more important than ever. I'm sure the whole House recognises that the Government has a special responsibility to facilitate positive relationships between different faith communities. And whilst I appreciate the Minister has now given some explanation of why they've chosen to withdraw funding for the IFN, outstanding questions remain. So can I ask the Minister some straightforward questions, please? Firstly, when was the decision to withdraw funding from this network made? What impact assessment was made, and what discussions were had about the vital need to continue to promote understanding about and between different faith groups and to encourage cooperation? When were the Interfaith Network notified of the decision? And finally, does the Minister have any plans to increase support to other groups to make up for any loss of provision by this decision? Madam Deputy Speaker, every department will inevitably monitor and review the grants it awards, but this House should expect that it's done in the spirit of due process. As politicians, we have a responsibility for bringing communities together, and at a time when divisions are being exposed, I hope the Minister can assure the House that the Government remains committed to interfaith and multi-faith dialogue.
I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for her comments. And again, I want to stress the importance of interfaith work. I see it in my own constituency. It is very, very important. And government is already supporting other institutions which do that. You asked specifically for timelines. The Secretary of State wrote to the IFN on the 19th of January saying that he was minded to withdraw the offer of funding in light of what we have discussed. The Secretary of State invited the Interfaith Network to make representations to him on this matter, and the Secretary of State received their response on the 22nd of January. After careful considerations of those representations, Secretary of State confirmed that he wishes to withdraw the offer of funding to the Interfaith Network for the reasons that we have discussed. The Secretary of State wrote to the co-chairs on the 21st of February, informing them of this decision. I just want to stress again, the Department has been very, very clear that the Interfaith Network should have been developing other sustainable sources of funding.
Bob Blackman.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I am proud to represent the constituency in this country with the greatest adherence to religious faith. And many of those faiths are minority religions. We have a very strong interfaith council that brings together people of all religions to sort out their differences and sort out tensions. I've had representations from the Jain community, the Zoroastrian community and others to say their concern now is that the majority religions, the larger religions in this country, will always be able to get their say because of the strength of power, but the minority religions will not. Given the decision by the government to withdraw funding here, what is going to take the place of this important organisation that brings together people of all faiths to enable to settle their differences?
I'd like to thank the Honourable Gentleman for everything he does with his faith communities in his constituency. As I have said previously, DLUC continues to fund a range of partners, including near neighbours and strengthening faith institutions. We do believe in interfaith work to strengthen community cohesion.
Holly Lynch.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank my right honourable friend for having secured this urgent question. I secured the adjournment debate, urging the government to think again about this back in January. But one of the things I think I found most concerning about how this has been handled is there have been occasions where journalists seem to have been in possession, either at the same time or even possibly before, letters from the Secretary of State to the Interfaith Network. Now, that is no way to carry on. There has been very little attempts to have any serious conversations with the Interfaith Network without those letters being in the public domain almost immediately. I do ask the Minister, will she think again, because it's not too late. This work is more important now than ever before. Will she think again about funding this organisation into the future?
As I have said previously, very proper consideration went into this decision after we had heard representations from the Interfaith Network. This decision has now been made in terms of government funding. We have always been clear that the Interfaith Network needs to develop alternative sources of funding. Institutions such as these cannot be reliant solely on government funding.
Sir Christopher Cho.
Speaker, isn't that just the point, that this organisation has had about £2 million in income in the last 5 years, and 3/4 of that has come from the government, from the taxpayer? And isn't the message for other organisations that they shouldn't be too dependent upon taxpayer funding?
I think my right honourable friend has expressed that very well.
Vera Hobhouse.
Deputy Speaker, I was contacted by my constituent Diana Francis, who's a Quaker, about her deep concern about the sudden withdrawal of funds for the interfaith group. My interfaith group in Bath of Interfaith Network has done invaluable work to bring communities together, to nurture tolerance and understanding, and the dialogue that is so important between different religious backgrounds. And can she not see that how this decision, this sudden decision of suddenly withdrawing the funding, is in a time of heightened tensions only driving division? And can she not see that in my constituency in Bath, people are really concerned that there's nothing that will replace such a unique organisation like the Interfaith Network?
As I have said previously, we strongly welcome all of the interfaith work that happens across our communities. We have always been clear that the Interfaith Network needed to diversify their funding sources, and we were also very clear that funding would not be given after 2024 in any instance. That was communicated to them back in July.
Barry Sherman.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I declare the interest that I am an active member of Christians in Parliament, and I am a former Parliamentary Church Warden of St Margaret's. Can I just say to the Minister that the Interfaith Network closure isn't seriously about a little bit of money, relatively small amount of money. It's a message at this time in our country, but all of us in this House are working for interfaith dialogue and trying to cool the atmosphere and all the problems that we know in many communities in this country. At this time, the Interfaith Network loses its money. That's psychological, and it's the wrong time and the wrong move. Please, please, for the good of our country and for community relations, will the government think again?
As I have said, interfaith work is very important, and we are funding a number of organisations to do that interfaith work, and I won't repeat the names, I've already mentioned them. The reason that the decision was taken here was because, as part of the core governance of the Interfaith Network, there is a member of the MCB that government does not maintain relations with.
Debbie Abraham.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I reiterate the points that other members have said, particularly the Right Honourable Member for East Ham and the Member for Halifax. The current international context for this to happen is absolutely outrageous. It is a politically obtuse decision. And I would like to press the Minister on the questions of my right honourable friend from the front bench around the risk assessment they have done in order to understand the impact on community relations.
I'd like to thank the Honourable Lady for her question. As I have said, very, very careful consideration went into making this decision. It has been a long-standing policy of successive governments, first actually introduced in 2009 under a Labour government, not to engage with the MCB.
Ruth Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I listened carefully to the Minister's response to my friend, the Honourable Member for East Ham, when she says the government takes interfaith work very seriously. But actions speak louder than words, and the cutting off of funding with just a few hours' notice is not helpful to this important organisation. So can I ask her, what steps will DLUC now take to support dialogue in any areas where it has been lost?
I'd like to thank my the Honourable Lady for her question. As I say, DLUC funds a number of organisations who work very intensively at a local level to support interfaith work and community cohesion.
Jim Shannon.
Deputy Speaker, I declare an interest as Chair of the APPG for Freedom of Religious Belief. As images outside this House last night made clear, it is very important that people of all faiths have a point to meet and to focus on the things that draw us together rather than those things that divide us. How will government and how will the Minister achieve this when these bodies close? That's the Interfaith Network. And how can we, and that means all of us in this House together and outside of this House, continue on journeys of embracing all faiths and awareness of those faiths?
I think understanding of faiths is incredibly important, and that is why we encourage interfaith work, especially at a local level. And I've already talked about what I do in my own constituency, and I find it very valuable. But in this particular instance, we cannot continue to fund the Interfaith Network, but we do fund other organisations and we wish them well. And we have always made clear to the Interfaith Network that they need to develop alternative sources of funding.
I thank the Minister for answering the urgent question, and we now move on to business questions. Shadow Leader of the House,